made me cry. Let's read this immediately. Kind of, yeah, didn't really meet expectations. I thought this was a very unique and original idea. Honestly, didn't love it that much. Hello, welcome to my 2025 Year in Books review video. My name is Lucy. I'm very new to the world of posting on YouTube. I'm British, but I live in Boston in Massachusetts. And really my goal on YouTube is to share my life here through vlogs, whether that be of travel that I do, weeks in my life, or videos like this. Reading is something that I love to do, and I will probably mention it a lot in my videos because I'm constantly reading a book. I thought this would be a good way to kind of do a sit down and go through all of the books I have actually read this year. One thing about me is I love Goodreads, and I set a goal on there at the start of the year to read 18 books. This was based on the fact that I had read 18 books in 2024. The reason why I didn't increase it is because last year was like my first year living in the US, and I kind of thought I'd be a bit busier, maybe wouldn't be able to read too much. Obviously kind of like started a new job here, so I didn't want to kind of overextend myself, but I have managed to read 20 books. My goal for next year is to read 26 books. I think I might do a separate video on my TBR for next year, but for now we're going to go through the 20 books that I did read, my thoughts on them, and kind of whether I'd recommend them. I have a big old stack of books here. This is very heavy. So I've read quite a few in physical copy. As you can see, we've got a bookshelf behind us. One of our favorite things to do is go to an in real life bookshop, browse there. A lot of books that I pick up are actually on like a discounted shelf. So books are really expensive in the US. They're like $20 for one book. But in the bookshop that we love, they do a discounted like table. And usually those books are like $7-ish, and they refresh them quite often. So I usually will just look on there and I'll pick up things that sound interesting to me. And I've actually found some books that I really like on that pile. So that's kind of what I do. And then I also do have a Kindle, which I lovingly decorate. So any other books I read on here. And I also discovered Libby towards the end of this year, which I don't know why I didn't really know about this before, but in the US, I think it's anywhere in the US, if you get a library card, you can then access like a digital library, and then you just download books on your Kindle and you can borrow them for like 2 weeks at a time or something. So that's been amazing. Sometimes it takes a while to get hold of a book, but so worth it to read for free. We would go in chronological order of what I read from the start of the year through to the end. Starting off, I read A Court of Wings and Ruin. This is the third book in the ACOTAR series. This is romantasy, and it's the first romantasy series I've ever read. It's something that I never thought I would be into. I thought fantasy was like too complex for me. I wouldn't be able to kind of keep track of all the different characters and creatures and the lore of the worlds. But I was so surprised when I read this. And I know maybe this isn't as hardcore as like pure fantasy, but I have thoroughly enjoyed these books, and I would say A Court of Wings and Ruin is my favorite of the series. Like, so much happens in this book. It honestly made me cry. I feel like I was on the edge of my seat, and I would describe it as being the same as watching like a battle scene in a movie where you really care about the characters and you're like, yes, please don't die. Yeah, this is my favorite and found it really fun to read. So I recommend the whole series, but this book in particular is great. Finished this on the 20th of January in 2025, and I gave this 5 stars. Second book of the year, which I finished on Feb 15th. I remember this one taking me a while to get through, so it's The Lovely Bones by Alice Sebold. I think this is quite an old book, and there's a movie, I think it's with Saoirse Ronan when she was very young in it, so yeah, I think this book has been around a while. Honestly, didn't love it that much. I gave it 3 stars. It's actually just quite a sad and depressing story, which it's meant to be. So it just wasn't the cheeriest, especially for miserable Jan-Feb time. I guess spoiler alert, it's told from the point of view of someone who's died, and I guess it's kind of like a ghost angel type character, and I think honestly I don't really love that POV in both movies and books. I like ghosts if it's like in the fantasy genre and there's a lot of other crazy stuff going on and that's very much like part of the world, but I think when it's based on like regular normal life but then someone's dead and kind of telling their point of view from like heaven or wherever, I don't really love that. So I think that's probably just more of like a personal take on it, but I guess overall an interesting concept, just not really for me, and it's kind of a sad story, but I definitely still want to watch the movie based on this, so I still plan to do that at some point, but yeah, not personally my favourite book. Then I took a bit of a break from reading. After that I didn't finish my next book until the 25th of May. This is because my work gets very busy around that time. So if you watch my goals for the year video, you'll see that I hope to read more books in 2026 because I'm going to try and read more throughout the first part of the year. But obviously in 2025 I kind of had a bit of a break and I picked up A Court of Frost and Starlight in May time, which this is also part of the ACOTAR series. So this is the 4th book and it's a lot smaller than the rest of them. I would describe this as kind of like a filler book, just to kind of bridge the gap between, I guess, 2 more intense books. I think people actually refer to this as book 3.5, but it's the 4th book in the series. I mean, I loved it because I love the characters and I am very invested in them and the story and the world, but definitely like not the best book of the series. I don't think it's meant to be. So I gave it 4 stars. Probably as a book in itself, it's probably 3 stars, but I gave it 4 stars just because I love the series and I'm invested in them and I enjoy reading about those characters. And in June, mid-June, I finished One True Loves by Taylor Jenkins Reid. This I picked up, this is a discounted book that I picked up because it was based in New England, so the character's hometown is in Massachusetts and then there's also some parts of this set in Boston. So yeah, I enjoy reading about the area that I'm living in. And obviously Taylor Jenkins Reid is like a well-known author. This was fine, it was a fine book, but I'm personally not a romance reader. I enjoy romance in the context of like a romantasy, but something that's just like purely about a relationship, I'm not hugely invested in. There was a bit more to this, I guess, than just pure romance, but I found the main character a little bit frustrating at times and didn't love how she treated some of the other characters. So yeah, I mean, it was a fine book. I don't think it took me like too long to get through it, and I guess it was a good one for summertime, but yeah, again, not my favorite. I guess recommend if you like this kind of thing, but I wouldn't necessarily say it's a must read. Then by the end of June, I also finished Pretty Girls by Karen Slaughter. This is a book that I think was recommended to Will and then he bought for me. This I really enjoyed. I read this super quickly whilst we were on holiday. It's definitely like a thriller, crime thriller, I guess you would say. It's a classic book where you constantly want to know what happens next. Kind of a messed up story, if I'm honest. So parts of it are hard to read and kind of make you cringe, but a very gripping storyline. And yeah, I read this and I think in literally a few days, so definitely recommend if that's your sort of thing. I gave this 5 stars. My problem with thriller books is I always give them 5 stars because I read them so quickly and I don't want to put them down, and then in hindsight I'm like, that probably could have been a 4-star. I was kind of just pulled in by the fact that I read it so quickly. So yeah, maybe we conclude and give that a 4.5. But yeah, would recommend this book. Then the next book I read, so this is also when I was on holiday, I read The Only One Left by Riley Saga. This was a book that I felt like I'd seen a lot on like Goodreads and kind of book TikToks and things. Yeah, I also really enjoyed this, also read this super quickly, very much a thriller too. Again though, I feel like now that I've recovered from being completely gripped by the book, it could probably be reduced from a 5-star to a 4-star, but definitely still massively recommend. There are lots of like twists and turns in this book. I guess some of them feel a little bit unrealistic, but overall it adds to the fact that it keeps you involved throughout. So yeah, I would recommend if you enjoy a thriller, and I would be keen to read more books from this author. Then I continued with my paperbacks and I read a Lisa Joy book, None of This Is True. I've read a few Lisa Joy books at this point, and something I would say is I feel like now that I've read a few, I'm realizing that they're all very, very similar. So I guess this is a spoiler. I feel like a lot of all of the books that I read from her are based around a random character coming into someone's life who is a bit strange, a little bit suspicious, but you kind of feel sorry for them because maybe they are just a little bit weird and have kind of been outcast by society a bit, so you feel a bit sorry for them and want to give them the benefit of the doubt. But then it turns out that you were right to be suspicious and they were an absolute psychopath. I feel like that has been the storyline in I think the 3 or 4 books that I've read of hers. So when I got to this one, a few chapters in, I was like, I kind of know how this is gonna go because this is how all the other books have gone. One thing I will say is I enjoy reading books that are set in London because I feel like it's very easy for me to picture what kind of the neighbourhoods look like and things. So I do enjoy that element. It was definitely an easy read, and I think these books have an important place in the world where you just need something that's quick to get through, it's gripping, I guess a little bit shocking. So, I mean, I recommend her as an author, but if you're looking for something that's kind of different, then probably not one for you. So I think overall I gave this 3 stars. But yeah, I can actually just say it's average, it's fine, but it's nothing unique. Then kind of in July, August time, I picked up the final book of the ACOTAR series. Well, I guess final for now because there should be another one coming out. So this is A Court of Silver Flames. And I mean, this was a great book too. This is a chunky one. But yeah, I mean, like I've said for the other 2, I love this series, I love the characters. This one kind of felt distinctly different because it was based more on the point of view of Nesta, and she's a completely different character in the way that she thinks and behaves to Vera. I think Nesta's great. She's obviously a complicated character, but I think it's interesting to see her point of view and how all of the events of the prior books have impacted her life and her relationships with the characters. And it's a book that really focuses more on friendship and inner strength more than anything else. There was obviously still a romance element, which probably was kind of predictable, but I would say the book focuses mostly on the friendship element, which is heartwarming, and you also still get the element of battles and hardships that are really gripping about these books. One thing I did find interesting was seeing Rhys and Feyre from an alternative perspective. I didn't enjoy that so much because I felt like in the first few books especially, you root for them so much, and then seeing them from a different point of view, you're like, oh, maybe they're not perfect. So that was interesting and maybe makes you feel a little bit uncomfortable, but I think definitely important to the storyline. And I'm very, very excited for when the next book comes out. I don't know when that will be, but hopefully soon. Then following the end of ACOTAR, I picked up Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir. This was a book that Will read. I think it was recommended to him, and then he told me, he was like, you must read this immediately. This is the first sci-fi book I've ever read, and honestly not a genre that I thought I would ever read, but I was like very surprised about how much I enjoyed this. There's definitely a lot of science in this. I mean, I don't know for sure, but I think Andy Weir, he's also the author of The Martian, is known for doing a lot of kind of research and putting like real science into these books. There's a lot of stuff that I recognised from biology at school. I know, it was kind of fun to be like, oh, I actually understand this from stuff I learned at school that I've kind of never thought about since. So that was interesting. And it's really a book about friendship and kind of unusual friendship. And it's really, really heartwarming. It's also heartbreaking at times, but it's just such a lovely book and different to anything I've read before. The movie is also coming out, I think in March, with Ryan Gosling. I'm so excited. The trailer looks amazing. It looks like a proper film from the early 2000s. Yeah, very excited for that. And yeah, recommend this book to anyone, even if you think you don't like sci-fi. I think you'll probably like this book. I guess when I think of sci-fi, I think boring, technical, only about pure space or pure science, but this book is really not that. I don't know whether this is representative of a lot of the sci-fi genre, but yeah, I would recommend this book very much. This was obviously a 5-star. The next thing I read, which I finished early September, was The Fury by Alex Michaelides. I don't actually know how to say his name, so I'm sorry if I butchered that. I read this on Kindle. I'm just gonna bring up the cover now. For some reason my Kindle's being really slow and I can't bring up the cover in full, but it's that middle one. If I'm correct, I think this author has 3 books in total and this was his 3rd. I have read the other two. So he's the author of The Silent Patient, which I think is quite a well-known book that I really enjoyed. Very gripping thriller. And then The Maidens as well is another one of his books that I read, which is honestly kind of messed up. But enjoyed that too. Whilst I was looking forward to The Fury, I had seen that it didn't have quite as good reviews on Goodreads, so I put it off for a while, and then I think I ended up buying it in like a Kindle sale or something, and unfortunately it kind of didn't really meet expectations. The main characters are based on actors and actresses, and they were like a little bit unbearable. Like none of the characters were likable, which I think whilst shouldn't be crucial to a book, I think it is important sometimes. And kind of similar to Lisa Joule, I feel like when you read the other two of his books, this one kind of felt similar, where you're kind of made to trust a character because either it's from their point of view or other characters trust them, and then it turns out that they're actually a bit messed up and you probably shouldn't have felt that way towards them, and then it kind of like makes you reflect on all of the rest of the book. But yeah, I would say it was very similar to his other books in a less interesting setting maybe. So yeah, not my favorite. Like it was fine, I got through it, it was readable, but I probably wouldn't really recommend reading this. So yeah, overall 3 stars for The Fury. Then on September 21st, I finished The Hallmarked Man by Robert Galbraith. So for anyone not familiar, this is part of a series, the Cormoran Strike series, and Robert Galbraith is a pseudonym for J.K. Rowling. I adore these books so much. I think this may be like the 8th in the series. They are honestly so good. They're all set in London, usually places that I can picture in my head, which I love. I think the characters are really likable. There's a very slow burning romance story, which really makes you keep coming back to see if the latest book is going to be when it happens. You get that side. Then each book also has kind of a self-contained detective mystery. Honestly, the stories are so complex, but very easily readable. So there's usually a few different storylines going on at once. There's usually like a lot of connections to make, and I can never ever figure out how it's going to end. I'm always surprised, but it's so easily digestible and gripping, and I recommend reading these books to anyone. And I think there's nothing better than discovering a series that has like 8 books and more to come. Definitely recommend diving into those because they're just the best. So obviously 5 stars for that one. One thing I will say is I did claim on Goodreads that this was my favourite of the series so far. In hindsight, I think that was probably recency bias, and it probably isn't my favourite, but I still loved it, and it definitely felt a little bit different than some of the other ones. Overall, loved the book. Probably wasn't my favourite of the series, but still 5 stars. Okay, I've just had to close one of the blinds because the sun was coming in hot, so the lighting may look a little bit different now. But yeah, so following Hallmarked Man, I then read Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. Although I will have to admit that I had to read Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone because my Kindle is now on the US version. I have never read the Harry Potter series before. I never read them as a kid and never read them as an adult so far, so I thought this would be a good thing to pick up in autumn, kind of pre-Halloween. I read the first one, really enjoyed it, as I feel like everyone does. A very cozy read, and I had seen the movie, so I kind of knew what was going to happen, but was good to read it and see the extra detail that's not included in the films. Really enjoyed that, read that one on Kindle. Hopefully we'll finish the series at some point. Then the next book I read was The First Witch of Boston. Well, that actually works. By Andrea Catalano. So I believe this is this author's first ever book, I think I saw on Goodreads. So this is one that actually came up on Goodreads as like recommended, I think based on like location. I was really excited for this book because it's based in Boston. I think it's technically historical fiction about, I guess, early witchcraft. It was definitely interesting to read from the perspective of hearing about what places were like in Boston back in the day. Obviously, I don't really know how realistic it is, but it was interesting to read about that. I definitely did feel for the character, and there were points in it which were very sad, and it sheds a new light on, I guess when I think of witchcraft back in the day, I kind of think that these people genuinely were trying to be witches and cast magic, but really they were just women who were outspoken and had skills in like medicine and things like that, and were just treated wrongly. So definitely felt for the character, and I think it was interesting to read about that and think about it from a different perspective than just like spooky stories that we're told. However, I felt like most of this book was very, very repetitive of the character kind of messing up, being at risk of getting in trouble and then just like repeatedly doing that over and over again. And I think that is kind of the point of the story, but at the same time it's frustrating and it was repetitive. Like much of the center of the book was kind of the same thing over and over. So it got to a point where I was like, I'm not sure anything more is really going to happen here. So I was a little bit disappointed by that element because I wasn't completely gripped, but I think overall it was interesting. But I did give it 3 stars just because I wasn't completely hooked by it. But I think an interesting topic, and very much interested to know more about if that was, like how accurate that story was. I think it was based on some parts of real people, but yeah, I guess would be interesting to know more about that. Then the next book I read was Vera Wong's Unsolicited Advice for Murderers by Jesse Sutanto. This is a book that Will had read, and he's read the second one too. And he recommended it to me, but I kind of was reluctant because I'm not usually a cozy murder reader. I prefer, if there's like a murder book, I prefer it to be more of like a thriller or a psychological thriller. So I was put off by this because I read other books like the Thursday Murder Club. I kind of like find them a little bit boring, but I really enjoyed this book. It's definitely more of a comedy aspect to it. Very entertaining. I liked the characters. Definitely a cozy read, but with a good twist at the end too. So would recommend this if you're looking for something that has a detective story but is cozy and not going to make you scared to go to sleep at night. So overall I gave this 4 stars. Good solid book, I'd say. Then I think it was kind of at the same time I was reading this, we started 75 Hard, so I also had to start picking up a non-fiction book, and I picked The Let Them Theory by Mel Robbins. So I also read this on my Kindle. I love the Mel Robbins podcast, and I think she has very interesting speakers on there. Something I listen to a lot when I'm like cleaning and stuff. I think she's a great person, a great speaker. And I'd heard a lot about this book. I feel like it was very hyped up. I seen like influencers kind of say like this is groundbreaking, like everyone must read this book, and I was a little bit disappointed. I didn't feel like anything in there was hugely new or, like I say, groundbreaking for me. It's not necessarily, I don't necessarily exercise the ideas in there, but I feel like I'm aware of the theory of not caring what people think. On a positive note, it was very easy to read, and I've always been put off by non-fiction books because I get bored of them. I didn't get bored of this book. I was able to read it easily, and Mel's voice definitely comes through the book, which helped having listened to her podcast a lot because it just kind of felt like I was listening to a podcast, but obviously I was reading, and I enjoyed reading the stories about her family and her life because I had heard bits on the podcast before. So I maybe have an unpopular opinion with this by saying I didn't enjoy it massively or think it was incredible, but yeah, just kind of being honest about that. I still gave it 4 stars, which maybe is a little bit of bias towards the fact that I like Mel Robbins and didn't want to give it 3 stars. I mean, I found it easy to read. I just didn't necessarily think that the theory was as groundbreaking as I expected. Then the next book I read was The Housemaid by Frida McFadden, which I think most people are aware of. This was actually a book club pick. I briefly joined a book club in my area, so I read it for this. I've read one Frida McFadden before, and like, I guess my overall review is that her book, based on the 2 books I read of hers, is that they're just like the classic bingeable thriller where it's not really necessarily a completely unique storyline, but they're very easy to read and you do become hooked because you want to know what's going to happen and what the twists and turns are going to be. I do feel like with The Housemaid though, it was quite predictable. The first kind of maybe 25% of the book, I was hooked. I was like, oh, what's going to happen? But then, spoiler alert, I kind of felt like it was obvious that the super nicey nice husband was actually going to be the psycho because there were no other characters involved at this point. I don't know, it just felt obvious to me that it was going to flip that way. That felt like the only twist that could really happen. I wasn't completely shocked by that, and I felt like that was kind of meant to be the main hitter of the story. So whilst I enjoyed it and I read it very quickly, I wasn't kind of taken away by that book. So yeah, recommend for an easy read. I gave it 3 stars. And I definitely will be watching the movie that's just come out. But yeah, just an average book in my opinion. Then after this I read Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, which was the second one in the series. Gave this 5 stars because it's just cozy, it's a good story, easy to read, fun. I've only read, these 2 Harry Potters so far. Was hoping to read more, but I kind of just had other books that I wanted to read over those. But yeah, we'll continue to pick up that series in the new year. Then after I finished The Latin Theory, I started a second non-fiction book kind of alongside my fiction books. I picked up Deeper Than Money. I can't remember the name of the author. But yeah, so Deeper Than Money by Chloe Elise. This is a book that had been on my TBR for a while. I was honestly really looking forward to this book. It's supposed to be a book written for very much beginners to understand how to manage their finances and build wealth without all the crazy jargon and someone just telling you to stick all your money in stocks and shares. And also a lot of finance books kind of assume that you have a lot of wealth already that can just be invested, whereas this is more from a different perspective of someone who is trying to understand money. So I think there were definitely like some bits in here that were useful. The only thing I would say it's a US written book, so it's tailored towards financial products in the US. So some of it didn't fully apply to me. There were some interesting things, but overall I didn't really draw anything out of it that was super useful for me. It was easy to read and it was written in an entertaining way, unlike some other finance books. I guess I would recommend if you really know nothing about finances and need a starting point, I think it would be great for that. I think that kind of is what the purpose of the book is. So yeah, overall 3 stars. Then the next book I read was Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo. This is a book I picked up in a bookshop a while ago just because I read the blurb and I thought it sounded really good. I guess after ACOTAR, this is the second kind of fantasy world that I've entered. Although I think this is technically more dark academia because it's based in Yale, which is also in New England, so it's kind of like another reason why I picked this up. It's like based in the real world, but there's a lot of things that go on that obviously do not happen in the real world. I thought this was a very unique and original idea. This is coming from someone who's not read any dark academia or fantasy, so it might just be the fact that this is the first book of this type that I have ever read. But I thought it was super interesting and yeah, different to anything I've read before. I gave it 4 stars only because I wasn't like dying to pick it up, which maybe is not how you should rate a book. I think this probably is a 5-star book, but it just took me kind of a long time to read it, even though I was enjoying it. Like, even though I was finding the story interesting, I found it, I guess, easy to put down. I wasn't like I was staying up super late because I had to read the next chapter. I was able to put it down. So maybe that's more of like a pacing issue for me in the book. But overall, I like really enjoyed this and I definitely would recommend it. And I'm going to pick up the next one in this series. Overall, love this book. Just maybe could have been a little bit faster paced for me. But yeah, recommend. Then the final book I read of the year was The Writing Retreat by Julia Bartz. Again, this was one I picked up in the bookshop, was on the sale rack. I read this because it was like a snowstorm that happens and I thought it was going to be, even though I knew there was going to be like maybe a bit of murder or something, I thought it was going to be more like cozy, snowy. It was definitely more of a psychological thriller than I expected, but I'm not complaining about that. I really enjoyed it. I gave it 5 stars. It kind of, again, felt a little bit different to things I had read before. The characters were different than what you usually get in kind of a locked room sort of style book. But yeah, definitely creepier than I expected. But yeah, overall, enjoyed this book. Was kind of like a quick read to end the year. Yeah, would recommend. So overall, those are my 20 books I read this year. I also did start Winter Street by Ellen Hildebrand last week. I was hoping to finish it before Christmas and it's now a week after Christmas and I'm still reading it. I honestly struggle with these books where I kind of feel like nothing really happens, which is what I did expect from a Christmas book, but I'm really struggling to get through it. I just need to power through and get it done. But yeah, I mean, it's fine for what it's supposed to be. I hope you enjoyed my review. I will share maybe another video about what I plan to read in the new year, because I definitely have some things on my shelf that I want to get started with. Let me know if you read any of these books and had different thoughts, or if you agree with my thoughts. I'd love to hear what you think. And also check out my Goodreads in my link tree. You can follow along with what I'm reading and how I rate my books. Thank you so much for watching. Please give this video a like, please comment, please subscribe. It would mean so much to me as a new YouTuber. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video.